Alright, so I know this ride has been properly revealed for a little while now, but with it getting closer and closer to completion, I wanted the chance to do a deep dive before it officially opened. ArieForce One is a brand new RMC hybrid coaster coming to Fun Spot America in Atlanta, and it looks crazy. Last time I did a video on this ride, we knew pretty much nothing, with the only thing to go off of being a couple concept photos. Now, with the full layout and stats revealed, along with the POV, I think it's as good a time as ever to discuss what we can expect from this ride. Let's take a closer look at ArieForce One. Before we get into that, I just want to discuss the name for a second. In my opinion, no. Just no. I get it being the name of the original owner and a pun based on the plane, but the promo video seems to suggest it's based on spaceflight, so I'm just confused. I misspell it almost every time, and I would be surprised if I was the only one. Luckily, a ride isn't ruined by a bad name. I mean, look at Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure. What really matters is the layout, and that's an entirely different story. That all starts with the first drop, which is 146 feet tall at an 83-degree angle. Compared to most coasters, that's a pretty great start, but it seems to be one of the weaker RMC first drops. That's not saying it'll be bad, because it won't, but we shouldn't expect anything like Iron Gwazi, for example. In comparison to other RMCs, it seems to be most similar to Goliath's first drop, which is 165 feet at 85 degrees. I haven't been on that ride, but if you have, expect something similar. From there we go into what Fun Spot is calling the first Raven Trust dive, which is basically just a fancy dive loop. This reminds me a lot of Velocicoaster's second inversion, which somehow manages to give airtime. I'm not sure if this element will do the same, but if it does, it looks like it may be banked airtime as well. This element is really interesting on its own, but I think it also showcases RMC trying a lot of new things with this ride. One complaint with a lot of RMCs are their repetitive layouts, and I think this ride breaks that trend in a lot of ways. The most similar element they've done like this up until now is again with Goliath. That was actually called a dive loop, and it doesn't have quite the profiling this does, but I'd expect something similar. After a small airtime pop, the next element, and yet another similarity to Goliath, is the 0G stall, which they're calling the world's largest. As of now, the only RMC stall I've experienced is on Iron Gwazi, which I found to be a bit disappointing. I'm expecting this one to be much better, however, based on what I've heard about Goliath's, and its size in comparison to Iron Gwazi's. Overall, it's definitely an element I'm anticipating. It then goes into an outer bank, which is relatively common on bigger RMCs like Steel Vengeance and Iron Gwazi. It probably won't be quite as good as those due to it being considerably smaller, but in the end, an outer bank is an outer bank. After that, the ride heads up into a double up, which should be a pretty fun moment. I experienced something like this at another Fun Spot park in Orlando. White Lightning has this weird double up / double down thing, which is pretty unique. Since this is an RMC, I'm expecting it to be much better here, although I'd prefer a double down to a double up. Or I would if an element later in the layout wasn't there. Anyhow, we then have this barrel roll, which will apparently put you pretty close to the arcade building. This reminds me a lot of Velocicoaster's Mosasaurus roll, putting riders extremely close to the lake. While I don't expect the inversion itself to be as good, the near-miss experience is always fun, especially upside down. The ride then goes into what Fun Spot calls fakey airtime. To me, this just looks like a short pop of banked airtime, which should be cool, but probably one of the weaker elements on this ride. That isn't saying much considering how excellent and unique this layout has looked so far, but still. Following that is a quick turnaround, which looks alright, but the way it leads into that additional barrel roll looks crazy. Kinda reminds me of some of the weird inversions on a lot of the new Vekoma rides. Definitely one of the elements I'm looking forward to the most. But then, we have the moment I'd say most people are looking forward to. I think it'll be okay. Alright, maybe a little more than okay, but let me explain myself. While I think this element looks cool, I don't think it looks nearly as good as the quad down on RMC's Lightning Rod. On that ride, what makes it so unique for me is how it hugs the terrain, and banks from side to side. Here it reminds me more so of the finale in Steel Vengeance, which is good, but it's more like airtime for the sake of airtime. In the end, airtime's airtime. God, I've said airtime a lot. But I'd still prefer the more unique and different elements over what is essentially a copy-paste. Maybe that's just me though. Should be a good element, but probably not my favorite on the ride. Needless to say, however, this layout looks fantastic. It's so unique for RMC, and despite being one of their smaller rides, seems to pack in a big punch. My last video on this ride was asking if it could be better than Iron Gwazi, and honestly, I think it will. I do need some more rides on Iron Gwazi to know for sure, but it didn't really do it for me as much as I hoped. That may just be all the hype I had going in, so hopefully my opinion will change in the future. Still, this ride looks so much more unique with some really crazy elements that I can't wait to experience. Also, that color scheme just looks awesome. It looks like we won't have to wait too much longer too, with construction ramping up and nearing completion for later this year. One final thing I'd like to touch on is how we could see Six Flags Over Georgia respond to this ride. And honestly, I'm not sure they will. Let me explain. Down in Florida, the Fun Spot parks aren't really trying to compete with the bigger offerings. Instead, they work as a complement, being a place you can go to after a full day at Universal or Disney. But there are two problems with that for the Atlanta park and Six Flags Over Georgia. Firstly is the distance, which is more than Fun Spot Kissimmee is to Disney. Secondly is the ride itself. I doubt many people who had just been to Six Flags Over Georgia, which has its own RMC, would be extremely interested in riding that similar of a ride. So, does that mean Fun Spot Atlanta is trying to be a direct competitor? Kind of, I think. My theory is that this ride is meant to attract people who drive by it after visiting Atlanta. Putting it at the entrance of the park seems to suggest that's the case. So while I think it'll bring in a lot of coaster enthusiasts, I think this ride is in a similar place to the Fun Spot parks in Orlando. Basically, it's a place that people might see and check out as a final stop on their trip. In the end, I don't think Six Flags would really want to respond to that, although we might finally see their new coaster soon. With all that being said though, I hope you enjoyed this video. I had a lot more to say about this ride than I expected, which speaks to how interesting it really is. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe for more like it. And be sure to check out some more while you're here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.